Welcome to Volume 30 of the American Railway series, which focuses on railroads in the east of Old Dominion, the Commonwealth of Virginia. Besides featuring the CSX RF&P subdivision, which runs from Richmond over the junction with the Buckingham Branch at Doswell, north through Fredericksburg via Alexandria to the Potomac River, where the track crosses the Long Bridge into Washington D.C, we include the Norfolk Southern Washington District to Manassas, a brief visit to Petersburg on the CSX North End Sub, and Williamsburg on the Peninsula Sub. We begin with the Norfolk Southern Washington District, which runs from the junction with the CSX RF&P at Alexandria to Lynchburg, Virginia. In Clifton, we view trains from each side of the track, filmed in October 2011. But first, Manassas, in May 2017, with cameras by the station and near the NS yard at the junction where the B line branches off to Edinburgh. This station was built by the Southern Railway in 1914. It was purchased by the city from Norfolk Southern and renovated in the 1990s to be served by the Virginia Railway Express Manassas line and Amtrak trains. This is VRE train 327, the 3:45 p.m. departure from Washington Union Station to Broad Run. It is powered by a Motive Power Incorporated MP36PH-3C.
Caution, the doors are about to close.
The train will terminate at Broad Run Station, 10 minutes away, then, only 6 minutes later, will begin its return journey as Train 338, the 510 from Broad Run to Union Station, driven from the blunt end. Amtrak's Train 50 Cardinal left Chicago nearly 24 hours ago at 5:45 p.m, calling here on its way to New York. A P-42 DC Genesis loco is at the head. In the yard by the junction for the B line, a C40-9 is with SD70 ACU number 7294 that was rebuilt by Norfolk Southern from former Union Pacific SD9043 Mac number 8066. Trying to hide behind the hoppers is a former Conrail SD70. The three closest locos in this lineup are SD60E number 6914, SD70M number 2609 and C40-8W number 8393. Train 329 is the 425 from Union Station. Terminating at Broad Run Station in the Washington District, not to be confused with the B line location named Broad Run, it will be serviced in the depot near Bristow to work an early commuter train in the morning. All three locos at the head of this northbound ballast train were built as 4,000 horsepower C40-9Ws, but were later uprated to 4,400 horsepower C44-9W standard. This was filmed from the south side of the track, where a Norfolk Western M930 caboose was on display. The second loco has a high short hood. These southbound empty ballast hoppers were hauled by a pair of GP38-2s. The leader began life with Penn Central in 1973, reaching Norfolk Southern via Conrail. Coupled to the train is one of 257 built for Southern Railway, with high short hoods, most of which were absorbed by Norfolk Southern. The 3-9s we saw earlier are returning south with their empty ballast hoppers, this time filmed from the north side of the track. Development of a village here began around 1868, when a railroad depot was constructed named Clifton Station. Now we turn our attention to the north end of the CSX RF&P subdivision between Lawton and Longbridge. At Lawton we filmed from the station platform. Scenes at Franconia Springfield Station were filmed in October 2011. Then we returned to May 2017 at Alexandria, and trains crossing Longbridge over the Potomac River filmed from Gravelly Point. Heading south, an ES44AH leads a former Conrail SD40-2. Lawton is a census-designated place in Fairfax County with a population just less than 19,000. The town is named after a Cumbrian village in the Lake District of England. Joseph Plaskett migrated here from that village to run a general store and opened the Lawton Valley Post Office in 1875. Now Lawton is one of the two stations that serve Amtrak's Auto Train, which carries passengers and their vehicles non-stop between here and Sanford, Florida, handy for Orlando. Amtrak's Northeast Regional Train 174 is the 7 a.m. departure from Richmond to Boston. Filmed in October 2011, this northbound train was powered by an SD70 Mac, an SD70 Ace and an SD40-2 that was delivered new to the seaboard coastline in 1979. It is believed that the SD70 Ace, number 4843, was sold to Progress Rail in 2017. Following the ES40 DC GEVO on point were an SD50-2 that was rebuilt from a former Baltimore and Ohio SD50, a C40-8 in the grey YN2 livery, and a GP15-1 built for Conrail. The Richmond, Fredericksburg and Potomac Railroad, after which the CSX RF&P Sub was named, built the original station on this site in 1870. It was demolished in 1952. The new station for Virginia Railway Express services was opened in 1995. When the Washington Metro was to be extended to this region, it was proposed that there would be two stations for Springfield and Franconia on separate spurs, but they opted for the simpler, cheaper solution of a shared station next to the VRE station between the two communities. Part of that metro station is the concrete structure that can be seen in the rear of this view. Propelled by a former Conrail GP38-2, maintenance of way will take possession of the far track. Another down-rated DC Gevo leads a Yellow-Nose 2 liveried AC44CW number 355 on refrigerator cars carrying juice from Florida. Virginia Railway Express Fredericksburg Line Train 301 is the 12:55 departure from Union Station to Spotsylvania. Work completed, the maintenance of way train returns. Filmed from the Metro path, under construction at the time, this manifest is powered by an ES44AH and a Helm Leasing Corporation SD40-2, ferrying a former Seaboard System MP15T switcher. The Helm Lease loco was one of the earliest SD40s built in 1966 for Southern Pacific, who refurbished it to SD40R standard in the early 1990s. When rebuilt to SD40-2 standard, it retained its original frame, so is shorter in length than the new build SD40-2s. It served Nebraska Central Railroad before being taken on by Helm Financial Leasing. Another ES44AH AC44CW combination heads north. It is often difficult to tell what goods are being carried in these trains. On this occasion, the flat cars loaded with steel plate are obvious. All the black tank cars appeared to be empty. The white tank cars with black bands are for sodium hydroxide solution, and the last white tanker with horizontal blue stripes carries limestone slurry. Returning to scenes filmed in 2017, this is Amtrak's Train 89 Palmetto, the 6:02 AM from New York bound for Savannah, Georgia. This artistic wide-angle view accentuates the speed of approach. Genesis number 94 is the motive power for Northeast Regional Train 84. It left Norfolk, Virginia at 6:10 this morning, heading for New York. The Federal Revival-style brick passenger terminal was completed in 1905 and remains in use after renovation in 1982. Gravelly Point is near the north end of Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Having been held at a signal when we arrived, Train 79 Carolinian resumes its journey south to Charlotte, North Carolina. The Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority has a bridge crossing the Potomac River close to the CSX Long Bridge, giving the initial impression from this angle that the trains are using the same bridge. The bridge is used by Metro Yellow Line trains, which run between Huntingdon in the south, through Mount Vernon Square, to the northeast outskirts of Washington D.C. at Fort Totten. During the time of day of our visit, the Metro Yellow Line schedule is for one service in each direction every 12 minutes. Flying across the bridge apparently is Northeast Regional Train 176, the 7:38 AM from Lynchburg to Boston. The clock tower on the skyline in the right of this view looks closer than it is. It belongs to the Trump International Hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, about 1.3 miles away from the riverbank in a straight line distance. In the background, the head of the train is now passing the Jefferson Memorial and the Washington Monument. The locos are two ES44AH sandwiching an AC44CW, exhibiting three of the more common CSX liveries. Yellow Nose 3 boxcar variant leads Yellow Nose 2 hockey stick, then the original Yellow Nose 3, but with added lightning beneath the number. The Washington Monument obelisk was built to commemorate the first President of the United States, George Washington, of course. Construction began in 1848, but halted in 1854 for 23 years due to lack of funding, the Civil War, and a struggle for control of the Washington National Monument Society. It was finally fully completed and opened in 1888, and was briefly the world's tallest man-made structure, but the Eiffel Tower was nearing completion in Paris and was considerably taller. However, it is still the tallest obelisk in the world, and the tallest structure made predominantly from stone. The Jefferson Memorial is dedicated to Thomas Jefferson. He was one of the most important of the American founding fathers, as the main drafter and writer of the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson was the first US Secretary of State under George Washington, the second Vice President under John Adams, then became the third President himself from 1801 to 1809. The memorial was constructed during the Second World War, with the bronze statue of Jefferson added in 1947. We think there were 105 loaded coal hoppers, but we may have miscounted. An ES44AH leads an AC44CW heading north. The green hoppers often carry soybeans, followed by steel plates on flat cars. The pink hoppers carry potash. When opened in 1904, the Long Bridge Railroad Bridge reused 10 truss spans from the old Delaware River Bridge in Trenton, with one new span and a through truss swing span. The swing span was retained during a rebuild in 1943, that used replacement plate girder spans. The swing section has not been used since the bridge carrying the I-395 highway opened just upstream. Due to insufficient capacity, resiliency and redundancy to accommodate projected future demand, there is an ongoing project to study alternative solutions that may include the construction of an additional two-track bridge parallel to Longbridge, or its replacement with a higher capacity bridge. The project includes the area between Roslyn Interlocking, railway location RO, in Arlington to the west of the bridge, to L'Enfant Interlocking, location LE, at the east end. The CSX RF&P subdivision continues south to the North End Sub in Richmond, which we filmed crossing over the east-west Rivanna Sub. Then we pay a brief visit to the North End Sub through Petersburg and the Peninsula Sub through Williamsburg. But first, we are just north of Richmond at Doswell, where the Buckingham Branch crosses the RF&P with exchange sidings just to the north of the diamond. Apparently, CSX gave Squasherpenny Junction permission to display artworks on their property, provided that it was fenced to discourage trespassing rail fans. In the Buckingham Branch sidings, number 14 is a high short hood Jeep 38-2 that was built for the Southern Railway. Number 3 is a rebuilt GP16 that was delivered to the Charleston and Western Carolina Railway as a GP7 in 1950, arriving at Buckingham Branch via the Seaboard System and CSX. We mentioned Amtrak's Auto Train earlier. This is the southbound run, Train 53, the 4 p.m. from Lawton to Sanford. It is reckoned to be the longest passenger train in the world, but we believe the auto racks were included in that length. On this occasion there were 17 passenger cars and 33 auto racks, powered by a pair of P40 DC locos. This Buckingham Branch GP40, heading for the exchange sidings, was built in 1968 for the Pacific Coast Railroad, but also served the Ohio Central Railroad system and Conrail. A pair of ES44AH locos and a C40-8W approach the diamond. The former Seaboard Systems hopper now belongs to Interstate Commodities Incorporated. As do the former Soo Line hoppers. Doswell was known originally as Hanover Junction on the Virginia Central Railroad, which is now the Buckingham Branch, but also appeared as Sexton's Junction on Lloyd's official map of Virginia around 1861. HN Tower was built in 1929 to protect the diamond, staffed by Richmond, Fredericksburg and Potomac personnel, but both railroads paid their salaries. HN Tower was retired in 1958. In Richmond, we filmed from the highway bridge on Westover Hills Boulevard with views of the North End subdivision crossing over the Rivanna Sub, James River and Norfolk Southern's Richmond district on the south bank in the distance. When we arrived, eastbound trains were tied down on both tracks on the Rivanna subdivision. A pair of jeeps headed the southbound local on the North End Sub. Filming from the centre of Boulevard Bridge, even using a heavy tripod-mounted camera was hampered by severe vibration and significant vertical movement due to passing traffic on this relatively flexible bridge. Then our cameraman heard train horns and had to run back to his previous position. At the head are an ES40DC with an AC44CW and a Tier 4 emissions compliant ET44AH delivered in 2015. These covered hoppers are owned by Midwest Railcar Corporation. They are Association of American Railroads Class LO and a mix of types C113 and newer C114. We have shown you the whole of the train, but as it took over 6 minutes to trundle by, we hope you don't mind that we edited it down to pass in less than a third of that time. The crew for the coal train arrived about 3:20 p.m, but it would be another 25 minutes before they were on the move. An Evolution Series 44AH is on point, harnessed with another of the relatively new ET44AH locos. A pair of unidentified GEVOs are about to head south over the North End Subdivision Bridge in the background. On the CSX North End Sub, the double-track concrete A-line bridge was built jointly by the Atlantic Coastline Railroad and the Richmond, Fredericksburg and Potomac Railroad in 1919. Following the shipping containers, empty refrigerator cars that normally carry fruit juice are returning south. Located at the foreline of the James River, the city of Richmond was founded in 1737. Today, it is Virginia's state capital with a population of about 230,000, but its metropolitan area has over 1.25 million. Maybe that gentleman has a dog walking app on his cell phone. This coal train crawled past even more slowly than the preceding hoppers. It took nearly 15 minutes altogether for 143 loaded hoppers to pass. As before, it is edited down to make it more bearable, while still showing the whole of the train. It appears to be commonplace for people to exercise their dogs on the railroad tracks around here. Following the North End subdivision south, we pay a brief visit to Petersburg, filming scenes at the Amtrak station, located in the region of the city known as Ettrick, and at North Collier Junction. The first four were ES44AH locos. The fifth was delivered to Seaboard System as an SD50 in 1984, but has since been rebuilt twice by CSX, so is now SD50-3 standard. The station here was built by the Atlantic Coast Line Railroad and opened in 1955. Now it is owned by CSX, but is operated by Amtrak. It is relatively close to the Virginia State University and the Rogers Stadium, used by the university gridiron football team. We have to admit that one of the main reasons we came to the station was to gain at least some shelter from the persistent rain, while continuing to be able to view and film trains. Amtrak's northbound Palmetto service is following the train that is still running through the station. At the moment, it is expected to depart 14 minutes late. This train looked as though it may be two trains coupled together. The first 89 cars were covered hoppers similar to those in the first train we saw departing Richmond. Then came 127 empty coal hoppers, making a total of 216 cars. Look out for the distributed power unit 28 cars from the tail. Situated just over 20 miles to the south of Richmond, on the Appomattox River, Petersburg became important early in the 18th century as the southern terminal of the Upper Appomattox Canal navigation system, with its connection to the James River east of the Atlantic Seaboard Fall Line. Transport again stimulated city growth when railroads arrived in the mid-1800s, with a transfer hub between competing railroads traversing north-south and east-west, still the case today, but now between CSX and Norfolk Southern. Expecting the Palmetto to be delayed as advertised, we were still wiping the rain from our camera lenses when it slipped in behind us. In fact, it was only 5 minutes late rather than 14. The northbound Palmetto, Amtrak's Train 90, runs to New York, departing from Savannah, Georgia at 8:20 a.m. Arriving from New York is Train 91 Silver Star to Tampa and Miami, Florida.
Attention please. This is the last call for Amtrak Silver Star Train 91 en route to Miami with intermediate stop. Passengers should proceed to track line. Please remove any travel documents from your envelope and have them ready for scanning by the conductor. Thank you for choosing Amtrak.
Having already travelled 360 miles, it left Petersburg only 20 minutes behind schedule. following morning, this is train 92 Silver Star from Miami and Tampa to New York. On point, an ET-44AH led a Union Pacific ES-44AC and a Canadian National ST-75I, ferrying two CSX locos, an ST-50-2 and a National Railway Equipment 3GS-21B genset. If you enjoyed this brief visit to Petersburg, you may like to know that Volume 28 of the American Railway series included more extensive features on Lynchburg, Petersburg and Roanoke. The following scenes at Williamsburg on the Peninsula subdivision were filmed in the October sunshine back in 2011. Heading south, an ES-44AH is in charge of the Newport News local. Northeast Regional Train 67 left Boston at 9:30 the previous evening, heading for Newport News. The loco is sporting the Phase 1 Heritage livery, celebrating the 40th year of Amtrak. It was followed by a 100-hopper unit coal train. In charge were a C40-8W leading an AC44CW. Williamsburg is an independent city in the Commonwealth of Virginia with a population around 15,000. Its economy is largely tourism-based, forming part of an historic triangle with nearby Jamestown and Yorktown, which attracts over 4 million tourists per year. Williamsburg was built on fortified high ground midway between those two towns, which were situated on the banks of the rivers bearing their respective names. The National Park Service constructed the Colonial Parkway connecting the three historic attractions. The scenic roadway is deliberately shielded from commercial development to help visitors imagine the peace and beauty that the colonists found when they arrived. Returning empties are powered by a pair of AC-44 CW locos. Colonists first arrived at Jamestown in 1607. The indigenous Powhatan people welcomed them, believing that trading with them would benefit both those who had always lived there and the new arrivals. However, within 20 years, it was clear that the colonists had no intention of sharing the land. In addition to what amounted to military action against them, the Powhatan had no resistance to diseases such as smallpox and measles carried in from Europe, so abandoned their villages and fled. The colonists constructed a defensive palisade across the peninsula, with a primary guard station at Middle Plantation. Jamestown was originally the capital of the colony, but an armed rebellion led by Nathaniel Bacon against Governor William Berkeley burned down government buildings, causing temporary relocation to Middle Plantation while the State House was rebuilt. When the State House burned down again 4 years later, this time by accident, a new town was laid out at Middle Plantation, named Williamsburg, with the government relocating to the new Capitol buildings. Returning to the CSX RF&P subdivision, we follow it north from Doswell, through Peninsula, Fredericksburg, Leeland, Brook and Aquia, concluding at Neabsco. Our cameras are by a grade crossing at Peninsula, then at Fredericksburg they are located next to the river and on the station platform, but first a brief return to Doswell 3 weeks after our first visit. The rebuilt GP16 that we saw previously now occupies the place previously held by the high-nosed Jeep. This is the Buckingham Branch headquarters, across the road from the yard. We saw number 14 previously, Number 16 is another high-nose GP38-2 built for the Southern Railway, on the duty that was worked by a GP40 the last time we were here. North to Peninsula now, for a southbound intermodal powered by an ET44AH and an AC44CW. Peninsula is a small unincorporated community in Caroline County. A post office was established here in 1857, given the name Peninsula, which was derived from the Native American language meaning cotton. The post office remained in operation for over 100 years until the service was discontinued in 1961. There was once a Richmond, Fredericksburg and Potomac Railroad station here, which opened in 1886. An hour and 15 minutes passed before the next train, Northeast Regional Train 95, the 6:10 from Boston to Newport News. Did you notice the flailing conductor? We think he's a rail fan. Let's take a closer look. A P40 DC speeds north with the Carolinian, Amtrak's Train 80, on its way from Charlotte, North Carolina to Boston. Filmed from Sophia Street, Northeast Regional Train 94 from Newport News has just pulled out of the station, bound for Boston. The power at the head was a pair of ES40DC GEVOs. This is the same train, but on a different day, as the one we saw crossing the bridge over the James River in Richmond on the North End Sub. As before, there will be refrigerator cars on the tail returning to Florida. We believe it is train K651. The RF&P bridge over the Rappahannock River is a very similar design to the one we saw earlier in Richmond. Again, it is a double-track open spandrel arch bridge of concrete construction. It was built in 1925 when the railroad through the city was elevated to ease the increasing use of automobiles. This elevated station was built to replace the ground-level station house. It is served by Amtrak, which took over RF&P passenger services in 1971, and Virginia Railway Express commuter trains introduced in 1992. Originally, Fredericksburg was the terminus for VRE trains on the appropriately named Fredericksburg line, but the service was extended to a new terminus at Spotsylvania in 2015, in an attempt to ease parking problems in Fredericksburg. A stack train followed 20 minutes later. The population of Fredericksburg is rising. Current estimates put it a little less than 30,000. It is located by the Rappahannock River on the Atlantic seaboard fall line. As such, it became an important port in the colonial era. When European settlers arrived, most of the Piedmont area was inhabited by Siouan-speaking tribe known as the Manahoac. Their village, at what is now Fredericksburg, was recorded by colonists as Mahaskahod. The tidewater and coastal plain areas were inhabited by tribes belonging to the Powhatan Confederacy. Fredericksburg is roughly halfway between Washington and Richmond, about 10 miles closer to the latter. Therefore, its port was strategically important during the Civil War, being midway between the Union and Confederate capitals. During the First Battle of Fredericksburg in 1862, the town suffered significant damage, but nearly 10,000 slaves found freedom, with many joining the Union lines. It wasn't until the 20th century that Fredericksburg population levels were restored to pre-war levels. Continuing our journey north, we filmed from the station and an overhead bridge at Leeland, and from the station and a grade crossing just round the bend at Brook, before viewing the bridge crossing picturesque Aquia Creek. Keeping well clear of the area around Quantico, the programme concludes with cameras either side of the headland at Neabsco and Powell's Creek. No Amtrak trains are scheduled to stop here. Train 89, the southbound Palmetto, does so because its progress is checked by a signal. Northbound, 89 loaded rock hoppers are being dragged up the slight incline by an ST70 Mack leading an ES44AH. The railroad location was named Leeland after a very small unincorporated community nearby. VRE's Leeland Road Station serves nearby communities including Hickory Ridge and Bel Air, but the website of larger Falmouth appears to claim the station as its own. The Leeland Station community was built near and named after the station. The heavy accelerating train made the platform bounce considerably. Half an hour later, named after the small unincorporated community in which it is situated, Brook Station is built in the familiar style of other new-build commuter stations for the Virginia Railway Express. It has a large car park to serve primarily passengers driving south from nearby Stafford. A pair of ES-44AH Gevos head north over Aquia Creek past the marina. There are a number of marinas around here on the west bank of the creek. This one is Hope Springs Marina. Initially, the Richmond-Fredericksburg and Potomac Railroad's northern terminus was here at Aquia, with passengers continuing to Washington on the Potomac by steamboat. In 1861, 2 days after the Virginia Convention in Richmond voted to secede, the United States seized the steamboats, while Virginia seized the RF&P property at the terminal. To stall the Union advance, the Confederates destroyed Aquia Wharf, 3 miles of track and bridges before retreating. Colonel Herman Haupt led the Union engineers, replacing the track in only 3 days. They then built a 150-foot railroad bridge in 16 hours and constructed an 80-foot high, 400-foot long trestle in just 9 days. Lastly, cameras are by the trestle at Neabsco to the north of Lee Sylvania State Park, while another is on the south side with views of Powell's Creek. "40 minutes later, are you enjoying that? Following only 5 minutes behind, an ES40 DC leads a C40-8W and a GP40-2. The composition of the manifest is very similar to others seen previously in this programme. White tank cars for sodium hydroxide and limestone slurry. Of the black tank cars, some were empty, while others contained liquefied petroleum gas. Flat cars carried steel plates previously. And the pink hoppers are for potash. Thank you for joining us on this journey exploring railroads in the historic eastern part of Virginia, featuring the CSX RF&P subdivision. We hope you enjoyed watching this programme as much as we did filming and producing it.